But I think we could all imagine the terrible male-written, male-directed version of this film. Strippers go on a heist and then their uppance comes.
Can we not have that film, please?
The tagline is their uppance will come. All right, before we begin, this episode is sponsored by ScriptUp, expert story and script consultants. ScriptUp are filmmakers and listeners of the podcast. They offer excellent service, giving you a report and, most importantly, a Zoom call to discuss your script. We've used their service and can vouch for it. So if you're looking for experienced, independent insight into how your story and script is working, consider using ScriptUp. And if you tell them that Draft Zero sent you by using the promo code DZ10, then you'll get 10% off.
Hi, I'm Chas Fisher.
And I'm Stu Willis.
And welcome to Draft Zero, a podcast where two Aussie filmmakers try to work out what makes great screenplays work.
Well, actually, one filmmaker and then us tourists. We are once again joined by Kodie Bedford. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. I can't believe you asked me back.
We needed someone to read the Wikipedia articles for us. So,
well, lucky for you, I have got them up in my tabs.
Anyway, we are looking at genre, but we're looking through it a different lens. We're looking at what we are calling drama in genre clothing. So films which are going to be Hustlers, Pig, and Power of the Dog. And if you've seen any of those films, you can probably get an idea of what we're talking about, which is film that seem on the surface to use some of the elements of genre. Well, it's really, they all kind of turn into dramas, right, at some point in their journey. So we want to explore what they're doing to kind of give us both a better insight into writing drama and also a better insight into genre.
This is a spiritual follow-up to our last episode where we looked at what, in our view, kept genre fresh in Get Out, The Invisible Man, and, God help me, what was the third film? Promising Young Woman. And in trying to select the three movies for that episode, we were looking at Power of the Dog and Hustlers, which on the surface seemed like perfect entries into their genre. And it was only when thinking about them that it's like, oh, you know, is Power of the Dog really a Western? And look, we really should excerpt
Sam Elliot.
Did you see Power of the Dog? Did you watch that movie?
Yeah, you want to talk about that piece of shit?
Oh, no. You didn't like that one?
Fuck no.
Okay, why?
There was a fucking full-page ad out in the LA Times, and there was a review, and it talked about the evisceration of the American myth.
Huh.
And I thought, what the fuck?
And then him getting bitch slapped by Jane Campion.
I'm sorry. He was being a little bit of a bitch. And I'm sorry to say it, but he's not a cowboy. He's an actor.
But I think the key difference between the films that looked at last episode and the films that we're looking at this episode, and I'm happy for you guys to disagree with me or venture your own opinions, but for me, the three films in the previous episode very much delivered on what we were calling the, you know, audience contract or the emotional contract or the experience contract of their genre. And I think these three films are less interested in delivering on that contract of their genre and instead want to deliver, you know, classical drama, I guess more character driven.
Yes. I mean, but you don't even get Nicolas Cage caging out in Pig, right?
Yes, I cannot wait to talk about Pig. I know we're not doing that first, but that's just that's a prelude to keep in tune.
And I think the experience contract is interesting because it's like, what are they, like they're almost subverting that. And I think there are cases I've heard from a friend of the podcast, Mel, her friend walked out of it. Right? Because it is like all these films kind of like twist and turns, and my parents and I, like remotely, because they're in a different state, but we occasionally watch movies together, so we have something to talk about over FaceTime, and they watched Hustlers with me, and they're like, oh, it gets much better as it goes on. And I think that's because they was feeling it turn more into a drama. So
it'll be interesting to see, you know, like Power of the Dog was also, I think, had people who loved it and people who couldn't stand it as well. You know, putting Sam Elliot to one side.
Are you Team Sam?
Am I Team Sam? No, I really love Power of the Dog. I saw it in cinemas. And I think I'm really glad that I saw it in cinemas, you know, in that like captive audience, didn't know what I was getting into other than I was like, oh, it's Jane Campion. I'm just going to show up to see a Jane Campion film.
All of us took away lessons, hopefully, from last episode. And, you know, it was that idea that these are these conventions of genres that create this emotional experience or this emotional contract or what do you want to call it. And so interesting to me for all of these is what of those elements, genre elements that they're using. And part of it is, I think, particularly Pig and Hustlers kind of stick to some pretty strong genre conventions, but then they completely throw out others. And a lot of them are around actually the inciting incident and how the films are set up is kind of my establishing point. Chas, is anything from the previous episode that you think's worth summarizing to leading into this?
Not so much a summary, more as an approach. I think it would be worth us, as we get to each film, saying what is the genre clothing that these films have embraced and what do we think are those conventions, to then see which of those conventions they've either embraced or thrown in the garbage pile. And I think it'll be a very different set of conventions because in our last episode, we focused on delivering on the audience contract meant that they weren't pulling kind of every lever. They weren't changing character and tone and setting and rules of the world and those kind of things. You know, the filmmakers might change one quite considerably to keep it fresh, but they weren't pulling all of those. And I think certainly as these films go on, they pull, you know, more and more of the levers such that most of these films, by the end of the film, they're not recognizably of the genre that they set out to be.
Right. And yeah. And is it a gradual transformation or is it a sudden shift? It feels to me, and I know we're kind of ice skating over them, but like, you know, Pig has got chapter cards, but certainly Hustlers felt like it had very clear chapters. And even Power of the Dog, which is the film that I've seen the least recently,
also has chapters.
Yeah. Kodie, was there anything you remember from the previous episode that you kind of bring forward or that you kind of been thinking about in terms of genre? Or have you just been too busy getting nominated for like Premier Literary Awards and directing television and, you know?
No, back to that point, I actually thought you chose these films on purpose because of the clear chapters. Was that not on purpose?
No.
Oh, interesting.
Well, it kind of is.
Possibly, yeah.
It is kind of.
I don't think that's wrong.
I don't think that's wrong.
Not right.
I do think it's like a stylistic choice that they kind of almost have to put up these signposts to be like, we're changing the conventions on you, and so you kind of need a gear change. Like,
yeah, that's true. I mean, Promising Young Woman did it. Hey.
Yeah.
Look, I don't want to bury the lead here, but Hustlers, you know, takes on the style trappings of a heist movie, right? Power of the Dog clearly takes on the stylistic trappings of a Western, and Pig takes on the stylistic trappings of a revenge kind of action thriller.
Well, I guess you don't need to ask us what genre we think they're in the clothing of now, Chas. We all just
well, those are the ones I think they are, but, you know, you guys are welcome to disagree. Anyway, have we buried the lead sufficiently to actually get into a movie?
Into Hustlers? Yeah. Let me put on my silky fur coat.
I just want to take care of my grandma, maybe go shopping every once in a while.
When I was a kid, I always wanted to work with animals. I was close.
Shake a little ass, you get a little bag.
These Wall Street guys, you see what they did to this country? They stole from everybody. Hardworking people lost everything. And not one of these douchebags went to jail.
The game is rigged, and it does not reward people who play by the rules.
But it's like robbing a bank, except you get the keys. Are you in?
I got a
Hustlers is a crime kind of black comedy. So it's got like part of the genre elements that's at play is definitely both crime. Like, and there's definitely Scorseseisms in there. There's a bit of comedy in there and drama. So it's got the heist thing, but it's definitely leading into comedy elements. And it's based on a true story, which they very much set up at the beginning. It's about a group of strippers that we see through the eyes of Destiny.
It's your classic stripper name.
And later Destiny has a child, so there's Destiny's Child in the film.
Well done.
Mm-hmm. Thanks. So Destiny's met a character called Ramona, played by Jay Lopez, who is stunning in this film. I'm doing a poor job summarizing it because there's definitely 3 broad movements to the film, right? So it's Destiny starting work at this new strip club, the first act of the film. We see her kind of interacting and learning the ropes of being a stripper. And then the global financial crisis happens. And she also happens to get pregnant. And the second act of the film is her teaming up with Ramona, who was her mentor in the first act. Ramona kind of finds her and says, I've got a bit of a scam going on. Let's start going and seeking out marks and fleecing their credit cards. And then that scheme gets further and further. They kind of go down the spiral out. And then the third act is us realizing there's been a framing device that kind of becomes more prominent, which is that the characters, particularly Destiny, are being interviewed by a journalist. Mm-hmm. And the third act is kind of the consequences of the journalist writing the article. Because I guess the big spoiler here is what you realize is that Destiny takes a deal and puts her needs of her family and her child ahead of them. And so she, I guess, becomes turns informant. I'm not sure of the particular terminology, but basically in exchange for pleading guilty and giving them all the details, she is serves no jail time.
She's a snitch.
All right, I've already thrown out the stylistic trappings of a heist movie. Are there any other genres involved here?
I would agree. That was my first thing. This is a cool heist. No, it's fun like a heist. You gather the team. You do the fucking robbing. Oh, I just said fuck. Am I allowed to say fuck? I don't remember.
Of course you are.
And then what you said before, though, elements of Scorsese. I'm like, yeah, actually. It felt like Goodfellas fun, didn't it?
Mm.
Yeah, there's a bit of voiceover going on. So it's leaning into some of those, just those tropes, all the great slow motion shots of money.
Well, just throwing out, that's, I think, another, a smaller subgenre, but stripper movies are, I think, a genre. I don't think they're, a super hugely populated genre, but that kind of exploitation, I just think of, striptease, showgirls, even Coyote Ugly is not strippers, but it's
you seem to have watched a lot of stripper films, Jazz.
I'll have you know, I found the Coyote Ugly CD soundtrack in an op shop recently and I bought it. I forgot how good it is.
I mean, it's interesting. You talk about style, and we're actually talking about the trappings of the style when it's made into a movie, a part of the genre. I mean, this is stuff that's not necessarily what the writers can absolutely write in voiceover, but slow motion sequences and voiceover and Steadicam and the great needle drops. I
mean, also inadvertently, we have chosen 3 films with writer-directors.
Oh.
But Hustlers, to me, the reason I raise it as a quote-unquote stripper movie, and you could also call it a dance movie or the competition sports movie, because the first act is, how do I get good at stripping? I have to find the good mentor, the super stripper, who has to teach me how to be a great stripper.
Yeah.
Right?
You get a great training montage.
Yeah.
Of so you definitely get the mentor character, you get all the stylistic trappings of that. But, in terms of character tropes, you get the new girl that has had to turn to stripping, that's got to team up with the mentor. I mean, they're classic in other genres, but that's kind of part of that crime genre. You get the introduction to kind of all the types of characters, the seedy characters in this world. So it's actually interesting. Part of what I was thinking about with all these films in genre is the worlds, the settings, the worlds that they're set in, and how they kind of change that.
So what you're saying is Hustlers is the Mighty Ducks.
I think you would find some very similar structural things between the first act.
Absolutely.
To me, I wish I'd marked when it happened, because I actually watched this when I thought it was going to be appearing in the last episode, and I didn't rewatch it for this episode. But I want to know when the first appearance of Julia Stiles as the reporter, because to me, it tweaked me as going, this is the first time the film is telling us that it isn't the stripper heist movie that it's selling us to be, right? So the emotional contract or the experience contract that the film is setting us up is this is going to be a stripper heist movie, but it's telling us that it goes badly. They don't pull off the heist. that the team breaks up.
The inciting incident is combining two things, and this is something that Pig does as well. And I don't want to be an overly a structuralist, but it's interesting that they both do it, which is Ramona being like, I'll show you my ways, is the inciting incident. Deborah sitting under the Ramona's fur coat, like them building a bond. And then we cut to, and this is like on the top of the building, freezing cold, all done up with makeup. And then we cut to this like front on shot, super bright, with Dorothy looking more like a housewife, very different color scheme, like literally very desaturated, very pastel. It's a very big jump, and it gives us the year, and we're like, oh, something has happened. And that she's that wide shot of her is showing her as alone. So we're creating that tension, but we're actually kind of setting up what the third act of the film is going to be about, which is what's actually happened between these two women.
Yeah, that it's actually about friendship.
As opposed to about being the big mark. Because I think it's worth saying in terms of the genre expectation, might as well say it now, because I think it's set up here, is you'll get the fun games in the second act. They will just realize that there's going to be some big mark, right? Oh, we're going to go after, what's his name, Warren Buffett or something like that, And then the third act of the film is going to be them real time robbing. Right, we've seen all these montages, but then we're going to get this third act kind of beat by beat play of them trying to pull off this heist, and it either succeeds or it doesn't. And that is not that third act of this film at all, right? There is no big mark.
No.
Yeah. And look, the article that Lorraine Scafaria was adapting, it was very much like you can hear how this is a genius logline. Like post GFC, the strippers, set out to rob the bankers who robbed the country. And you can see that as, the stripper heist movie.
But that's the second act. So the first act is them getting together, learning to be really good at it, and then having the rug pulled out of them because of the GFC. And suddenly the club is no longer, and then again, it's the combining of like an external thing and an internal thing. So the external thing that happens is that there's the GFC, and the internal thing that happens to Deborah is she gets pregnant.
But I'm just saying that the framing device of those interviews, because it doesn't end up being subverted to be like part of the heist genre, because it's actually, a real interaction, it's actually, giving away the plot ending of the film, or at least, very strongly hinting towards it, because it's already starting to peel away from those expectations that you've just outlined for us, Stu.
Yeah, actually, you're right, because we're not surprised how it ends then. So why do we stick with it?
That's the great question, isn't it? I mean, look, interestingly, my notes for the previous film, I went very like following the structure and seeing how it aligned with what my genre expectations were or not. My notes on these films are very, very different. It's like, what are the key things that jumped out at me that kept me engaged?
Yeah.
And one of the notes that I've got here right after that is, as the film progresses and we keep going back to those journo interviews, as their actions get morally worse, Elizabeth, the reporter, her reactions get way more judgmental. And like, that's obviously a directed performance, but she is playing the audience here. Like, we're not supposed to be enjoying these strippers drugging these Wall Street guys.
Yeah, and there's this great moment when Deborah makes the tea and gives the tea to Elizabeth, the journalist, and she kind of looks at her like, are you drugging me?
Yeah.
Right? Like, and that is the midpoint, right? So it's still sitting on some of these conventions, but it's that kind of classic spiral, here's the movie, we start doing a good thing and we're enjoying it, and then we have to cross over the line. But it ends up being, because it's got that tension of something has happened in the future, and we're still piecing together the timeline, right? Like, we know, but the advantage of the interviews, I guess, is it means that we know we're not yet in the present.
Yeah.
So it was Ramona's idea that you two worked together?
Yes, that's right. And at this point, everything was above board. I mean, I thought she was nice.
And when would you say that things got out of control?
So there's that tension of what's happened to the friendship.
Yeah.
Stu, my gut instinct is that the Christmas scene is the midpoint.
Maybe. I would argue that it's them beginning to use the ketamine on people. I would say the Christmas thing is just before the low point, and that it is. And I love that Christmas scene. Like, I think it's actually one of the best scenes in the film in just terms of actually people just hanging out.
I wrote about that scene because that's the scene where it became really apparent to me that the movie isn't about the heists, that it's about the relationships between all these people.
I mean, there's no plot. The plot stopped.
Yeah, it becomes about family. I mean, if you're going to demonstrate family, and you write a Christmas scene or a dinner scene, right?
Yeah.
Well, that's what I've been doing wrong.
The happiest time. I think it's genius doing that scene.
And then it cuts. It's a hard cut.
It's a hard. I love the use of hard cuts in this.
So, getting back to the drugging.
Is that what you're hung up on?
Like Julia Stiles just like slams it back. But it wasn't just, I mean, look, the gifts were ridiculous and they were expensive, but they were also very deeply personal between all the different characters. It painted them as a true family in the way that no one had been to these people before. They got that amazing story out of the character of Dorothy's, is it her grandmother?
Yeah, known as Destiny's grandma.
You're fired.
Yeah, I'm so fired.
One stands with Frankie Valli.
What? Nana! Did you know this?
It was before he got married. The second time.
I don't know, Nan. I don't know about that. Are you sure?
Pretty sure.
Yes, you're not really sure. My God, this woman is my spirit animal.
If that's, the moment before the low point where they've taken a scene, they've removed all the plot, and they've just let these characters hang together and let us kind of love who they are together and actually go, oh, this is all going to work out well, isn't it?
Well, it's a low sequence, right? Because it builds
Yes.
into that, and then there's just that series of shit things. It's like the guy nearly dies, and then she has to turn up to the school dressed as like still in all her clothes, and everyone kind of judging her. And then the kicker is her nan dying.
Whenever, like, isn't it a rule whenever you see characters really happy, like midway, shit's going to go really down for them. That's the rule, right? Screenwriting rule.
Yeah. Well, I think it's because it's contrast, right? Like, how do you make things feel worse? You need to have a bright point beforehand.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, I think that's why low points often are where they are, because it's like, how do you get to the happy? Because it makes victory feel sweeter, I guess, taste sweeter.
Well, I mean, for emerging screenwriters, if you're going to kick the shit out of your character, make sure you show their really happiest moment just before you do.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Stop being so mean, Kodie.
No. Someone said to me, just kick the shit out of your characters. And I've never forgotten that. I think it's a great rule. We're so cruel, us writers.
Mm-hmm.
Well, like you're saying, Stu, so then the low point of this film is 3 kind of really terrible things happening to Destiny/Dorothy in a row. So one of the marks gets overdrugged, strips off all his clothes, and jumps off the roof of a house onto a concrete floor.
What the fuck happened?
He said he could dive off the roof, and I said he couldn't.
Well, you're right. Where's Georgia?
She took off.
Where the fuck is Ramona? This is her
I
client.
couldn't get in contact with her.
And they have to take him to hospital. And I've got written here that the low point there isn't them having to go to the hospital, it's Ramona not being there, because Destiny's constantly calling Ramona and Ramona isn't picking up. And then, in her blood-stained stripper clothes, she goes to drop her daughter off at school and is getting embarrassed in her life pimping out these strippers as drug-induced thieves is not going well for her, and then her nan dies, which was...
This is the problem with having employees, right? That's what they try to franchise their business, and it didn't work out.
Yeah.
Do you think when her nan passes, like even actually when she goes to school and is embarrassed at school, that for me was the point it turned into a drama, because it became real world.
I guess it's about they're making the low point here about the impact or the cost of what they're choosing to do on Destiny, right? It's not like a low point like, oh, we've lost the plans, or, I mean, the low point, the classic low point that I often because I referenced Star Wars and lots of things.
Ooh.
Like the death of Obi-Wan Kenobi is the low point in Star Wars, right? But it's not that, like, they have the moment of Luke being upset, but they don't dwell in it. It's not about the impact of the loss of, it's not about exploring the loss of it. It's like a plot point rather than, I don't know. I know what you're saying. I'm thinking that's a broad example, because you're saying this is about what's happening to her, right? It's shifting the stakes. It's a heist movie where the low point isn't the bad guy working out the plan.
Yeah, I guess for me, it suddenly stopped being about the heist. It suddenly began to be about real character choices.
Can I say then that for me, that scene was the Christmas scene?
Of course.
Oh, no, I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just saying that for me, that was the scene where it became a drama, because I'm like, oh, this movie isn't about heists at all. This movie is about this family.
Yes, I agree.
Right? And then when Julia Stiles hard cuts into it, says back to the drugging, it's like, oh, this movie is about how the drugging breaks up this family, right? So that's when, to me, I went, oh, this is a drama. But both that Christmas scene and the drugged Mark leaping off the building naked and them having to take him to hospital, those are still very stylistically stripper heist heightened scenes. And what you've said is they brought it, like they made it real, like those scenes that you're talking about is where they very much abandoned the trappings and the style and the glitz of stripper heist.
And it's done visually, right? It's actually like, if you want to talk about crossing worlds, right? We go from the world of these kind of like neon lights and nighttime and all that stuff to the world of having a child. It's all daylight. It's very bright. And then they make an emphasis on how everyone else is really well dressed or conservatively dressed, and Destiny's suddenly running around in night gear, and she doesn't belong in this world, right?
Yeah.
And it's all these long steady cam shots, like the shot of her going to a house and then having to run across the road. I don't know why it struck me. It struck me both times I've watched this. You know, this is just great steady cam shot of her running across the road looking for her child, because they could have cut and they've chosen not to.
I guess that school moment is when I really connected with her in terms of feeling like a fish out of water. And I guess that universal feeling, and this is, I guess, down to great writing, directing, that universal feeling of making you relate to the character in terms of shame.
Really leaning into that kind of like long tracking shots to really just make you experience it with her. So that's me thinking about more directing, but that kind of choice to hold on that stuff as continuous long takes is absolutely about us feeling empathy for that character. Oh, yeah, it is. It's pretty much her walking out, taking the kid to the door and coming out is just like a single steady cam shot.
Amazing.
So good.
And then, like you said, to button on that is Nan's funeral, which is, you know, grey, rainy, dour. All the strippers are dressed in black, not in their glitzy glam outfits. So stylistically, it takes a real shift.
There's a bigger stylistic shift here, which I absolutely love. One, we start getting these just silent cuts to the car going away. So we introduce this idea that Destiny's mother kind of left her with the grandma. So you get that, but more importantly, it starts playing with sound. So they bring up this, I can't remember, he's Josh? Doug. Yeah. So they bring up this Doug and they censor his name. And you're like, what? And then they do it twice. And you're like, what? I don't know why. They've just beeped it out, like Doug beep. And it's kind of disorientating when you first hear it. And then Destiny says, we're not talking about him. And then she leans down and presses stop on the recorder in front of her. And the film goes silent, right? And it plays it in silence. And you suddenly go, oh, this is recorded, right? And so it's done a stylistic shift where it's kind of, I'm like almost leaning to more it being in this kind of procedural genre. And then they do that again, that one of these characters from Handmaid's Tale, Dawn.
They'd already built her up well as being the unreliable drug user that Destiny did not want to bring onto the crew, but they were having to grow their, you know, like capitalism, like a pyramid scheme, they were spending more than they were earning, so they had to take on more people and outsource and franchise and keep drugging and kidnapping these guys.
Why should we split anything when we can have it all?
After she cut out the club, we had to meet our clients in hotel rooms or in their homes upstate.
Where the fuck are they?
Annabelle's feeling grossed out lately. A lot of the girls stopped showing up.
And what about Mercedes? Is she feeling grossed out? You know, we can't keep giving them their cut if they're not going to show up for weeks on end.
You need a bigger crew. I'm gonna call Coco.
No, she's a junkie.
Fine. What about Georgia?
She just got out of jail.
And Trixie?
She's still in jail. Ramona, quit bringing home strays. We're breaking the law here. We don't want to work with criminals.
And she was already painted as the liability, and she ended up, being the one who the cops tried to use to sting them.
So they put a wiretap on her and they play the whole scene from the perspective of the wiretap. They do audio perspective stuff.
Look, I don't think that he likes me. So I don't know. I think one of you's gonna have to do it. Are you high? What? Give her a break. No. Me? No. I don't do that kind of stuff anymore. It's not me.
Which one sounds awesome. Two, it's a great bit of storytelling, but it's a real stylistic shift, right? Like we're in a kind of a different genre of film, right? Is it the conversation? Like it kind of feels like moving into that kind of like 70s-ish, like it moves this into like some kind of procedural, and then we can bring in the cops.
I mean, not only is there this stylistic shift, but also Destiny and Ramona have become the subject of the film, not the protagonists. They are no longer in charge of the plot. The plot is happening to them. Can I just make a point here that it's from 3 different beats. It's 3 different moments with interviews between Destiny and Elizabeth. And it just made me write it down that when Destiny stops the recording, what gets her to re-engage back with the recording was anger at Ramona. And then hearing Ramona being honest and kind about her makes Dorothy cry. And it's a question that Elizabeth asks Dorothy about her and Ramona's relationship that makes her just cut the interview. So nearly all of those interview segments turn and pivot, and they're nearly always around Dorothy's relationship with Ramona.
Question for me, because the kind of what it feels like is the climactic decision the character has to, the crisis choice or final choice. There's lots of terms that people use where Deborah gets offered the deal to betray everyone. Did any of you really think that she was not going to take it? Did it feel like a true dilemma for you? I really like this film, but it's the one thing that didn't quite land for me.
Really?
I think it's because this idea that she was abandoned as a child and she doesn't want to abandon her child is brought up very late in the film. And I wonder if it was seeded earlier that would have coloured her absolute, like, I'm not leaving my child. Doesn't make it as a dilemma, right? That we know that she's going to betray Ramona, but you kind of have a feeling of her going, oh God, this is what I'm about to do.
To me, like that, the whole journo interview framing device told me what the decision was, told me that they were no longer friends, that they hadn't been friends and hadn't spoken for a number of years.
Thinking about it now, I wasn't surprised, but I felt, because I'd gone with this character through all the ups and downs, and they framed her feeling these very like real, relatable emotions, I felt her sadness, or is sadness the right word? I felt her, like, I guess her own shame in betraying Ramona. But I always knew she would choose against Ramona.
Shame. That's interesting because you talked about like her shame of going to the house, and I guess that there's a sense of her shame being not wanted by her parents. So that it's a really defining aspect of her character, right? Wow, that's making me rethink Deborah and Destiny.
Well, I think it's Dorothy. I've got written down here Dorothy.
And I've been calling her Deborah the whole time. That is terrible.
We're just going with it.
To me, yeah, sure. To me, the final choice wasn't whether she would snitch or not. To me, the final choice, and it comes, in the last minutes of the film, is will she reach out to Ramona again?
Are you still there?
I'm here.
So I was just reading the article again. And maybe the reason why we did what we did is because hurt people, you know?
Yeah. No, I understand.
So have you talked to Ramona lately?
No, just that one time. Have you?
No. Can I just ask you, like, what else did she say about me?
And when she does ask after her, that's just like, that's the journey, because it is all about, you know, that final scene. It makes the whole film about Dorothy and Ramona. And as much as Ramona has, you know, the classic killing them softly, the whole country is a strip club speech.
Look, there's nothing I can really say to make sense of what went down. But everybody's hustling. This city, not this whole country, is a strip club. You got people tossing the money and people doing the dance.
The final scene of the film is, you know, J-Lo like talking through the photos that she's got in her wallet. It's about family and the relationships that she has. And it's about Dorothy and Ramona.
All this here, this is Dorothy. Wasn't she the cutest? I mean, who could leave that baby? You know, we used to say, if only we had known each other back then, you know? Maybe we could have looked out for one another. Maybe our lives would have been different.
Like, it abandons, none of it is about heists. It's not even about class warfare, even though there's those scenes with, it's got a couple of cutaways with J-Lo like trying to get out of shifts at work.
It's like, because the film is them being exploited, them becoming the exploiters, both then of the rich and then them also taking on employees. So kind of flipping the script on its head, and then it becomes the downfall. And it is definitely paralleled between the fact that those men had probably done worse. And we definitely get this idea, like particularly that architect, like, you know, those men were very capable of done worse, probably done worse. They were men and kind of untouchable. And there's a line early on, which is like, everyone wanted to be like him. They wanted to be rich and not have any consequences. And consequences actually caught up to the women because, you know.
Because they're women.
Because they're women and they're not rich white guys.
Yeah.
Can I say, I think we've already answered this question. I'm wanting to point it out specifically because I think it's different in Hustlers than it is to the other two films that we're exploring. Where, for you, did it stop being a genre film and become a drama?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think for me, it's not that it stopped being a genre film. I think it shifted genres a couple of times. And I think what we perhaps mean by drama in this context, as you say, is about the real world, the impact of these things on this person. Maybe it's because it's grounding it in the domestic. Okay, it's like her and her child and at school, like all the day-to-day ordinary life stuff, as opposed to she goes to a mental institution and then walks away with like a fucking invisibility suit. Like that's not ordinary world stuff, right? And the Get Out changed their ending. They moved away from a drama ending to a cathartic ending.
Yeah.
And Promising Young Woman, she dies. So it is no longer about the impact of these things on whatever her character's name was. But I still think the third act has got elements of police, procedural stuff, and journalism.
But it is a different genre. Like, it's not glitzy. It's deliberately almost shot like a Law and Order episode. Then not just the low point for her, like we've talked about that tracking shot with the school drop-off and we talked about the Nan's funeral, but all those scenes with the journalist interview, they're shot in the same way. Like you said, they're very brightly lit, they're very desaturated.
They've got a bit of the Errol Morris Interrogotron flat eyeballing the camera stuff, which also Promising Young Woman uses, but this is better framed.
You said it, not me.
But to me, ultimately, why this movie fits in this episode and not in the last episode is I feel that Lorraine Scafaria, and, you know, obviously this is Chas feeling something rather than, I can't point to empirical evidence, but to me, she was more interested, and the film is more interested in Dorothy and Ramona's relationship than in heists or class commentary. And I maybe, look, the empirical thing I'll point to is that final scene. Like, it could have ended on Ramona doing this whole country is a strip club speech, and they didn't.
Such character-driven drama, real-life issues that I relate to them, even though I have no idea about their world. And I really feel like, oh my God, a female actually wrote and directed this without even knowing.
Oh, well, I mean, I think you can feel it in the strip club stuff. The male gaze is fairly absent.
Yeah.
It's presented like all the boobs and stuff is very matter of fact.
Yeah.
And even J-Lo on the pole feels more about like, oh my God, look at how strong she is than it is about titillation.
Yeah.
And when it does do the titillation stuff, it kind of makes you feel uncomfortable, right? You definitely feel the exploitative elements. I think it's beautifully directed.
I've just Googled a script and I have an April 2019 script. So it has, flashes of Destiny and Ramona's friendship in reverse, looking at each other in jail, fighting each other on the floor, holding hands at Grandma's funeral, ending with Elizabeth saying, "You should give her a call, Destiny." Returns to Destiny nodding, wiping away the tears and smiling. Then it's got some title cards. It has Ramona's speech. But the final scene is cue Janet Jackson's Miss You Much, and it's the night of their first big score. Destiny, Ramona, Mercedes, and Annabelle are celebrating together. Janet is playing. They're all lined up in the living room. 5, 6, 7, 8. The 4 girls do choreographed moves together, laughing. Both the script and the movie ends with the triumph of these women together dancing.
My takeaway, the thing that I've been thinking about, and it'd be interesting to look at this in the other two movies, is that I think the question the audience asks early on is, what happens between these two women?
Yeah.
Right? And then is only answered at the very end. And that's why it becomes a drama, right? The question isn't how do they stop the giant moon orbiting. I don't know. I'm trying to think. That's a classic genre question, right? I mean, I think Get Out is a little bit different because the question of like, how does he escape? Right? Like the question of, you don't even know what's going on. So Get Out is different, but Promising Young Woman is, will she get revenge? And that is more of a plot question.
Yeah.
Maybe misremembering. Invisible Man is, again, it's a plot question. It's about external things. Will she escape this guy? It's not about what happened between these two characters, but it's asked very early on. And I think Pig asked that very early on.
Nice segue. I'm going to just squish it briefly just to say it's the interview framing device that asked that question. Because they could have, if you imagine the film taking that device out, it would play pretty similarly, but that's doing a whole lot of foreboding and foreshadowing and reframing the film around that question of what happened to these two women.
Interestingly, I think this is genre in genre clothing. Like, it's a relationship drama in genre clothing, right?
I think you're right.
It's not just a drama in genre clothing. It's specifically a relationship drama, a breakup story, right? There's a meet cute.
Yeah.
And, well, not a meet cute. It's not like them bumping shoulders or anything. It's literally like, wow, I'm in love with this girl. And it's not sexual. It's her just being in awe of Ramona and then the collapse of that relationship.
Would we say then, because I was struggling to define what drama is, drama genre, would we say then drama is defined by relationships?
Yep.
I would say so. I mean, look, I think also tragedy fits into the drama mold, and that can be sort of like the opposite of the hero's journey, like the fall from grace. But this is definitely about like everything about Destiny / Dorothy's journey is in respect of Ramona.
Yeah.
And that's what the film is ultimately about. Like, I think in this category, it's probably the closest to its genre, and it like holds on to its genre trappings and uses its genre tropes for the longest out of these three films.
Oh, and it's still, crime films are about business, and business is about America, right? And it's thematically about stuff like that. It's just, it centers it on relationships, right?
For sure.
And maybe it feels fresh. I mean, maybe we could have done it in keeping genre fresh. It feels fresh because it's also about criminals that are not men.
Yeah.
And so it's not about male behaviors of dominance in the way that we kind of explore male relationships through criminality. It's about how we're exploring female relationships through criminality.
But I think we could all imagine the terrible male-written, male-directed version of this film. Strippers go on a heist and then their uppance comes.
Can we not have that film, please?
The tagline is their uppance will come.
And what makes this movie like so fresh is that it is ultimately, I think, a character drama that the audience is kept engaged the whole time buy all this other glitzy, glamoury tricks.
Oh, and the stylistic tricks are awesome.
Yeah.
There's some moments of directing in this that I absolutely are floored by.
Yeah.
And I particularly like the sound perspective stuff when it starts introducing the cops. Speaking of cops, shall we talk about Pig?
I'm looking for a truffle pig. Someone stole her.
I don't understand. Tell him who you are.
You made the right choice being out there in the woods. There's nothing here for you anymore. There's really nothing here for most of us. Buy yourself a new pig.
What are you thinking?
I remember every meal I ever cooked. I remember every person I ever served. You live your life for them, and they don't even see you. You don't even see yourself. We don't get a lot of things to really care about. Who has my pig?
You'll hear the sound effects of me filling up a wine glass, everyone. The Pig, which we decided is a revenge thriller, is that right? And that's what I thought this film was going to be.
It's history of violence meets John Wick meets Chef.
Mm-hmm.
We start with Rob, aka Nicolas Cage, being a truffle forager with his pig, his loyal pig. Then we get Rob, John Wick style, getting assaulted by some assailants. They steal the pig, therefore sets up Rob's mission of, I just want my pig back.
I mean, it's almost like Taken.
Yeah.
When Rob's beloved truffle pig is kidnapped, can he find her in time before the truffle pig is lost in the underground pig trafficking network?
Also underground fight club of waiters.
And chefs. Yeah.
Yes, this is where this film goes. So it's basically Rob and the only person that sort of sees him, the person that buys the truffle, I think his name right there, Amir, go on this sort of journey to find the pig, which leads them place to place to place, uncovering chef fighting rings. But then it unfolds into this like story of grief, and the characters all connecting about their losses. Rob's lost his wife, Amir's lost his mum. Eventually they find out that Amir's father, who he has a kind of a troubled relationship with, is behind the kidnapping due to business reasons. Rob, Nicolas Cage, goes to get his pig back, but Darius, I'm looking at the Wikipedia page, Darius, Amir's dad, says that he'll give him money in exchange for the pig, but really he doesn't realize the pig is more than money. The pig is about love, right? And loss and grief, all these things. And so in order to win his pig back, this is where you think he's going to go John Wick, get me my equipment. But really he goes and get a 2012 Pinot, I don't know, all these chef ingredients, and he cooks Darius a meal, the most amazing meal.
Poignantly, the meal that Darius had last eaten with his now comatose wife.
Yes.
The exact same meal.
Darius breaks down because of that fact, and eating this meal brings back those memories, reveals the pig has actually died.
In the kidnapping attempt.
Rob, of course, is grief-stricken. They go to a diner, order pie, but there's no pie available. I don't know why that's important, but it is. Then Rob, realizing that he says this beautiful line. I actually wrote this line down because I just thought it was amazing, where he's like,
I was thinking, if I never came looking for her, In my head, she'd still be alive.
Oh my God, it got me. Rob goes back to his cabin, not before having a swim, finally washing off the blood from Fight Club chef.
Well, and his original assault in the inciting incident as well.
Yeah, like just he's been walking around these fine dining places with just covered in blood, as one does, and then comes back to his cabin and plays the tape finally, which he's been struggling to play in the first act of his wife singing Bruce Springsteen.
Oh, is that who is that? Is that the song?
Yeah.
It's a Bruce Springsteen song.
The one about the pedophile.
Can I ask you guys a question? I watched this the other night with my wife and it ended and she was like, well, that was incredibly depressing. And I actually came out of it feeling not uplifted, but catharsis. I felt like the film had expunged the sadness from me and I felt like I left it in a good place.
The closure.
Yeah.
You get, like, which is what grief is about, searching for, I thought this whole film was about searching for closure of grief.
Mm.
I sat there through the whole credits, which is amazing. Stan lets you sit through the whole credits. Usually they cut you off.
He's a nice guy, that Stan.
For our international listeners, Stan is an Australian streaming service.
Because otherwise it's like, Stan, it's like, what, your partner sits there and normally if it comes to the end credits, it's like stops.
And the song that the wife is singing eventually fades out and it's this soundscape of the woods, right?
Mm.
And there's digging
and pig noises, which some of the fan theories is he got a new pig.
There are fan theories for this.
Stu, did you get closure from Pig or were you?
Yeah, I've talked about this on Twitter before. I am lucky that a couple of my closest male friends, of which Chas is surprisingly one, their kind of love language is food, right? So I got a couple of male friends who actually, like when I was in like isolation with COVID last year, like brought home cooked meals for me, and they're people that cook meals. So I'm not a cook at all, right? But the idea of people connecting with others through food is something that resonates with me. And so I interpreted, for me, it was a positive film because it's about a person who's being isolated that had this gift, clearly a gift, to make people feel emotion through food. Instead of going and killing this guy, which is what would have happened in a revenge film, what would have happened in a history of violence, which is an amazing film, but it's a brutal murder of their head boss at the end. He breaks into his house and cooks him food. And that moment of connection is healing in a way. It's not saying that there's not going to be scars. You can be healed and have scars, but that's, to me, yeah, it was a very positive message, but it was about, and you know, I took away with that Rob is not going to be isolated. Him saying like, I'll see you next Thursday is about like, I'm accepting people in my life again. And to me, that is a really positive thing. Coming back to the tape, you mentioned the tape earlier. I think the tape is a very clever thing. I'm going to say this is like my entire analysis for the film. And I'll just leave you two to talk after this. Actually, no, I've got two bits of analysis. Just before the inciting incident of the kidnapping of the pig, we are introduced to this tape, right? Amir turns up, buys the truffles off him, gives him a bunch of stuff, including batteries that he uses to power up his ghetto blaster. And he thinks about putting on this tape and he tries to play a tape and he can't listen to it and puts it away. So that literally asks the question, what is on this tape? And we don't get that answered until the last scene. So that's very similar to Hustlers, which is the idea of the ending of the film brings people back to the beginning.
I love that though. I write like that. I like circular writing.
Oh, absolutely. And I just think it's interesting. The drama, it starts off with the thriller engine on the inciting incident, but just before it is the kind of character stuff. And then really the character question, what that represents, what the talisman represents is when he listens to that, it's him being ready to let go of what has happened or no longer being in denial.
There's another way that it harks back to the beginning, which is the opening image of the water.
Oh, yeah.
So the very opening image of the film is this very dark blue rippling water over a very ominous tone, which I immediately wrote in my note, like, well, this feels like a thriller.
Yeah.
Right? Like it feels kind of like Mystic River or, those other.
Actually, that brings a good point. Because this film does set up as a revenge thriller, right? He just wants his pig back.
And he'll stop at nothing to get it back.
Yeah. Like he gets the shit beaten out of him. The villain, Darius, I kind of like beat the shit out of him. That's what I was like, because I thought I was buying into a revenge thriller. But then he cooked the cunt a meal. Sorry.
But okay, so you bang on the money already, Kodie. So what are the genre promises that this film has of the revenge thriller that it later abandons?
I thought he was going to get revenge. I thought it was very clever that the villain didn't end up being a villain. He was grieving himself. The layers kind of fall out of him in a weird way that you like, oh, shit. You kind of feel sorry for him. In terms of when I thought the genre kind of switched, it was that scene in the restaurant. They go to the fine dining restaurant and it's this amazing character scene of I want to speak to the chef. The chef comes in and someone that used to work for Rob, that Rob actually fired after 3 months. And this is amazing conversation, one-way conversation. Nicolas Cage talks about, you said you're going to open a pub. Why haven't you opened a pub? Why have you got a fine dining restaurant? And that for me is when it kind of clicked to me, this actually isn't a revenge film. It was that scene. What do you guys think?
I'm kind of with Stu where I think that it sustains itself as a film by the promise of, in each and every scene, at some point, Nick Cage is going to Nick Cage out.
Yeah.
Like, so the casting is perfect.
And I fucking love Mandy, which is absolutely a kidnapping revenge film that goes Have you seen it?
Not yet. It's on my list.
Oh, man. All you need to know, like, it's a revenge film, almost like someone smoked a bunch of weed and read a whole bunch of lyrics from 70s and 80s metal albums and turned that into a movie. It's fucking wild. He has a showdown with one of the bad guys where they have a chainsaw sword fight. So they each have a chainsaw and are basically like sword fighting each other with the chainsaw.
And even in this film, like even after that restaurant scene, in true revenge thriller mode, like we saw this in Promising Young Woman, there's chapter titles. This is, like you said, Stu, this is taken. It's like boss level, right? Like they go through, I have to keep going through. It's like John Wick. Each person and person and person until I find my pig.
It's a revenge structure. That's what they do. Like, I go and talk to the first person. They oppose me. And then I do the thing, which is usually beating the shit out of them. And they give me the clue to the next person. And the next person, they have to overcome the obstacle and get the clue, right? That is the classic structure. And it uses it the whole way until he meets the boss.
Yeah.
But that's all.
On the first step on his investigation to find his pig, he finds the people who actually kidnapped the pig and assaulted him. And in that trailer, you are expecting violence. And in every single interview that he has as he goes along, you are expecting violence. And to me, even after the restaurant scene where you were expecting violence and he completely subverts it, I was expecting violence. And then even at the very end of the film where Darius tells him, after being cooked that amazing meal that prompts the confession from Darius, because what you learn in that confession is that the previous time when Darius and Nick Cage had interacted and Darius offers to pay him out for the pig's already dead. Darius has no reason to pay Nicolas Cage or anything like that. He's just, playing the hard-ass role that he's fallen into to kind of close himself off from his grief. Pretending that he's got the pig and that it's alive and that he's not going to give it back to Robin.
He even threatens the pig's life.
Yeah. And even at that confession point, near the very end of the film, I was still expecting violence. So this film uses that revenge thriller trope, even though the film is teaching us as it goes along. Robin is like the antithesis of violence as a character. He is someone who is racked with guilt, but whose love is to give food and to feed people.
So this is cool structurally, right? So as soon as they go to the diner, He calls his friend Amir and they go straight to another truffle dealer. And I love the moment. Like Amir is being like very coy about it. And then Robin is like, you stole my truffle pick. And then it's like fucking into action. Like it made me laugh. The cut and the music made me fucking laugh. It was like joyous, right? Like, oh yeah, fuck yeah, we're into this movie. They go to the junkies and the junkies lead them to the city and we meet what we think is going to be like to use a hero's journey term, the threshold guardian, Edgar. And then that leads them into this underground fight ring. And that happens really early, right? So effectively they go and sneak into the back of the restaurant and go to this awesome cavernous space. And there's like a bunch of waiters beating up a homeless dude.
I mean, we think he's a homeless dude, but I'm not entirely sure.
No, my interpretation of it is that it's like that waiters are paying to beat up homeless, like get their frustration out.
But even then, like you think that this is the moment. If ever there's a moment that Nick Cage is going to go Nick Cage, it'd be this underground fight club with chefs scene.
Well, they deliberately don't say chefs. They say wait staff or restaurant staff. But the waiters put money down and there are names written on the wall. And it's interesting. One part of the reason why this film is telling me to expect violence is Edgar in that initial scene where like he brings him like $10 worth of, I don't know, poutine or something that looks delicious. And Edgar, that's like his payment to get the information about the pig.
Have you heard anything about a pig?
I remember a time when your name meant something to people, Robin. But now, you have no value.
So that made me think, oh, he's going to have to turn to violence because he doesn't have any value anymore. And he proves to Edgar he has value by writing his name up on a wall such that the wait staff are prepared to pay the biggest amount of money for the opportunity to beat the shit out of him.
And it's interesting because when you're talking about the caging out, you're like, oh, maybe the reason his name had value. We don't know he used to be a chef at this point, right? They're laying clues, but you're like, oh, maybe he used to be big in this underground fight scene. Right? And it's Nick Cage, as you say, you're expecting violence. And he chooses, instead of being the person inflicting violence, he's the person who has violence inflicted on him. And that's the subversion of that expectation. So it's a great moment of like, we are going into this cool, beautifully lit space. You know, they like a bunch of extras. It's probably the most expensive kind of scene in the film. I wouldn't be surprised, right? And I imagine they use it in the trailer because you're like, oh, Nick Cage is going to like fight his way for this pig. And he just gets the shit beaten out of him.
Which should have set up for us as an audience that he's not going to use violence in this film. Like that.
It should have, yeah.
But I think because of the casting rather than the scripting. Do you think if someone else was cast?
You know, like that's a chicken and egg scenario. I think they wrote the film and then cast someone that fulfills what they wrote and what the writer-director's expectation was to maintain that constant thread of violence over all these scenes. But like up until that point, like that sequence, the going and visiting Edgar and then going into the underground cavern and having the fight, that felt so John Wick to me because this is like, oh my God, this is painting this weird kind of supernatural world around fine dining.
Yeah, the Continental Hotel is like the...
Right? Like, it was super outlandish and absurd after the opening sequence that we'd seen, which was very kind of art house and calm about, you know, Robin and his pig finding truffles and leading that very quiet life. So I was like, oh, this is like John Wick or Blue Ruin. But that is where, for me, they let go. They use all that mystery of that sequence and that kind of otherworldly nature and raise all these questions. And while they, from a plot perspective, maintain the revenge thriller plot, like they keep going from stage to stage, from there's no more weird fine dining world building. It then goes back into very, very, that sequence is all that they needed to buy you almost the rest of the film's grace. Because one of the things that I really noted is after that sequence, they had the breakfast scene where Robin wakes up in Amir's flat.
Yeah, that's right.
And they have the weirdest conversation about Amir is prompted to confess about his mother dying, even though she turned out not to have died, but died, I guess, mentally, died in his life. And then Robin talks about this kind of existential earthquake, flood, apocalypse that's going to happen in Portland. So essentially, like, nothing matters. And the next scene after that is Robin going back to his old house that he shared with his dead wife.
Oh, yeah.
And just sitting like a bloodied hobo next to this poor, like, 4-year-old kid who's playing a musical instrument. And again, you're like, these scenes are beautiful, touching scenes, but the film has brought us the grace to have those scenes from this weird, like, revenge thriller mystery box sequence.
But it's still, there's a bit where kind of John Wick style where the believability, you can go, that would happen. Like in that brilliantly written restaurant scene I was referring to earlier, he's still sitting there with blood all over him.
Yeah.
And you're like, how did you get into this fine dining restaurant covered in blood? I mean, that's a point where I'm like, oh, I'm watching a film.
Yeah, except I have my very, very biased perspective here, but my father-in-law has early onset Alzheimer's, and part of his expression of his Alzheimer's is him just not giving a shit about what anyone thinks. He's lost complete respect for what anyone else thinks. And he's got a dog, a wonderful dog. He takes this dog everywhere. He went into a hotel and the hotel said no dogs, and he just walked straight past them and went up to his room with his dog.
Well,
and none of them said anything. And I totally buy, like, this fine dining restaurant where they had the reservation, him just walking and sitting down.
Actually.
Yeah.
It was just because the scene before it is, can I use your name? Yeah.
Yeah. You're right.
Yeah.
So they know it's Robin Feld.
Even though the waitress didn't really know.
The waitress didn't know, and the chef didn't know until she recognized.
That was great. That was a great
role.
cut.
Yeah.
But like the fact that they go from like seeing
the deconstructed scallops.
Yeah, but there's an introduction, like a very poetic introduction. As I said,
with smoked fir cone.
I do like how actually I did say that's when it switched into a drama, but I did like how the director writer did keep up the themes of a revenge thriller to the point where he's handing off a list at the kind of what you think is going to be the climax and going, get this equipment.
I'm going to need you to drop me off and go and get everything on that list.
I can't get all this stuff.
Check in with the names. Tell them you're with me.
Which you think in a revenge thriller would be guns, but it's food. He's going to cook up a meal, but it still uses those elements.
It's interesting that you say drama, because for me, that scene with the chef was so elevated. Like the guy feeling really uncomfortable. It almost took it from realism, like dramatic realism, to dramatic surrealism. Like it just heightened it in a different way.
You know why I related to that so much is because it pretty much laid out what the theme of this was. Lost dreams, grief. Yeah, living a life you're not supposed to.
You really want to open a pub?
I mean, Robin's character, we keep on, like, the revenge thriller stylistic trappings of it, the structure of it, belies the fact that he is an incredibly gentle man.
Yes.
And an incredibly loving man. And the scene that really got me there was after he gives Amir the shopping list. You know, again, like, he'd just confronted Darius. He knew that Darius has his pig. He'd asked for his pig back. Darius had offered him money, threatened him with violence, threatened the pig. Like, I was expecting violence. Nick Cage gives Amir the shopping list. And then there's that gorgeous scene where he goes back to his old restaurant and his old staff, like sous chef or someone who worked in the restaurant for him, has turned it into a bakery.
Bakery, yes.
And I think the scene's in like 2 shots, but the majority of it is in a static shot.
Oh, just that little, oh man, this film is so well directed.
And it is just so gorgeous because it's this baker clearly loving this man and clearly grieving for this man and wanting to rescue him, who hasn't seen him in so long, and him still kind of not letting his guard down, not wanting to let anyone in not wanting to let go of his grief, but just talking again, like you said, Kodie, about their dreams. And
Yeah.
she's like,
I kept it the same for a couple years. I thought maybe you'd come take it back. But you didn't. And, it wasn't me. You're a chef. I'm a baker.
I can't remember what point it is in the film. I'm 80% sure it's when he comes out of the Darius and Amir's waiting for him. And you were just referring to, and he says a line, something like, it's not about the money. I love the pig.
oh yeah, no, he tells Amir, he confesses to Amir, like he's been getting Amir to help him.
Yeah.
Because Amir thinks that unless he gets this pig back, Amir won't get these prize truffles that Robin has been able to find. And Robin finally confesses,
I don't need my pig to find truffles. What? The trees. The trees tell you where to look.
Then why the fuck did we do all this?
I love her.
I love her, and it hit me right in the heart, that line. I didn't know Nick Cage could make me feel the way he made me feel. And maybe because it's my dog is sick, but that line, I love her. And then the line I was referring to earlier about in my head she'd still be alive. Just amazing, amazing character relationships about and character journeys on grief and closure and love.
but we've all seen these we've all seen dramas about grief.
Yes.
And characters expressing grief. I mean, Lorraine Scafaria, who directed Hustlers, she did another great movie that's a comedy called The Meddler, which is a hilarious Susan Sarandon and Rose Byrne film, basically about Susan Sarandon's character coming to terms with the loss of her husband. Hilarious movie, really great. But it smuggles this movie about grief because you're like just sitting there waiting for Nick Cage to beat the shit out of someone.
It's true. And also, it's, I guess, because, setting it up as a revenge thriller, there's no real revenge at all.
None at all.
At all.
But there is, in an interesting way.
It confronts Darius with his humanity. It like reunites Darius with his grief.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I think it's revenge because it makes Darius go, I'm not a crime lord, because it's the whole like, my son isn't built for this world, right? All this like hard man stuff. And then he kind of melts it away with a delicious meal. And I just want to say, because I wanted to share one of my little small moments, I love, speaking of the kindness that we see Robin, it gets me emotional thinking about it. When he presents the wine to Amir's dad, to Darius, this Amir found this for you. He doesn't say, I sent Amir to get this. He doesn't take credit for it, right? He lets Amir, he creates an opportunity for his dad for Amir to be respected by his dad. And it's just an offhand line, but it's like, you should trust your son. He's good.
This is what I love about this film, actually. It's such a ridiculous plot. I mean, it has fucking Fight Club with chefs and waitstaff.
Yeah, and truffle pigs.
Yeah, and what the writer has done is made it grounded in real human emotions, and I think that's why I just found this film such a surprise, and why, by all means, I should hate this film. I should really hate this. It shouldn't be my film, but there's something very human about it. And I love it for that.
It is freshening up genre And like it's freshening up drama about grief through genre, and by leaning so heavily into the genre and kind of those modern like the John Wick kind of revenge, to the point where like that Fight Club film not only feels like it's from John Wick, I could imagine Robin Fell having a crossover moment with in the John Wick universe. You know how they're doing the Nobody John Wick? This feels like Robin Feld could turn up in the underground Fight Club underneath the Continental Hotel in that TV show that they're now doing set in the John Wick universe, right? It's such a heightened universe. This leans really heavily into revenge tropes and that kind of surrealistic revenge. But I think the difference is, we talked about this idea that the kind of thematic idea of Promising Young Woman is what is the price of justice. That it's not pursued with questions about revenge, right? None of those questions. It's actually about grief. What does it take to refine connection and stuff like that? And so it's interesting. I think it's thematically a lot further from its quote unquote genre than Hustlers is. Hustlers is still kind of like, yes, it's a character drama, but the thematic questions are still about, America being a strip club and commentary on business and money, and the fact that you see the Kim Kardashians in there early on and them spending all their money and the kind of class warfare stuff. So I think that's interesting. Like, it's kind of like, let's take a genre film, a genre structure and say, what if it's actually about grief?
How about if we take a revenge thriller structure and use it as a character study of one of the kindest men you'll ever meet?
Yeah. Fuck, that's amazing.
Just to reveal the depths of his kindness.
Yeah.
And his love.
Yeah, and it does it in a beautiful way through this idea that food, your meal is more than just your technique. It's who you are, right? And what he's telling you, the chef, is cruel, but it's also true, which is like, you're not happy here and I can taste it in your food.
As soon as this film started, and I'm expecting to see a revenge thriller about Nick Cage hunting down his pig, and then the chapter titles have the recipes in them, I'm like, oh, fuck, this film is for me. But okay, so we've got Pig, which has... Look, to me, it abandoned the stylistic trappings of being a revenge thriller after he wakes up in the apartment. It abandoned the stylistic trappings, but kept the structural trappings such that I was still expecting violence.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it kept on telling me, no, there's no violence coming. This guy is a really kind person who just wants people to live their best lives. And he wants his pig back. Those are the two things that he wants.
And for me, absolutely had the structural stuff about the pig. You answer the pig, but the film kept continuing because it needed to answer that question right at the beginning, which is what's on the tape. And what's on the tape is connected to his journey of grief.
Well, do you remember when it revisits the water from the opening? Mm. Just before he goes in and plays the tape, he goes back and he washes the blood off himself in the creek.
Beautiful.
Such an amazing film. Anyway.
Speaking of washing blood off yourself, shall we move on to Power of the Pig? No.
A man was made by patience and the odds against him.
For what kind of man would I be if I did not help my mother? If I did not save her.
Sort of a lonesome place out here, Pete, unless you get in the swing of things.
I don't know, did you enjoy this film, Stu? I might have been the one who enjoyed this film the most out of the three of us.
Enjoyed is not necessarily the word that I would use for it. I thought it... what I thought it did very effectively, which in a way is similar to Pig and in some ways similar to Hustler, is it felt like a film that snuck up on you, right? That all these films, I think, whatever criticisms you want to lay at Power of the Dog, I think this idea that it makes you, it's actually doing a sleight of hand, right? That you think it's film A and then it turns out it's film B. And it worked for me. Like in hindsight, for me, and I know it wasn't necessarily for everyone else, you're like, oh yeah, okay, I can see where it was coming from that. But this idea that it was going to be what it became kind of was somewhat, it was, surprising but inevitable, but it snuck up on me, right?
I had a Kodie moment where as soon as Peter went looking for the dead cow, I was like, oh, this is how he's going to kill Phil.
Wow.
So I like...
right up.
Oh, so you picked that up early.
Yeah, like as soon as he was like, because there'd been 2 mentions of anthrax beforehand, and I was just like, oh, he's getting anthrax poison. Like he put the gloves on. But I still found, even though I knew exactly where the film was going, I still found it riveting and engaging.
Riveting?
Yes.
I want to know more, please.
Look, I did see it in the cinema where I was a captive audience who couldn't check my phone.
Oh, really?
Okay, so should we try to summarize the plot? Because I think it is interesting because there's like the surface plot and then there's the B plot.
Ostensibly, the plot is around 2 brothers who own a ranch running cattle in Montana / New Zealand, and they are quite successful at it. And the big change that happens throughout the film is that George is unsatisfied with the loneliness of their cattle running life, such that he marries a widower from the nearest town, which feels like it's very far away. Phil is played by Benedict Cumberbatch. George is played by Jesse Plemons. The widow, Rose, is played by Kirsten Dunst. And Kirsten Dunst has a child played by Cody Smith-McPhee named Peter.
They make fun of him early on when we meet him because he's quite effeminate.
And it's nearly the whole... As soon as that happens, the rest of the film is kind of like this building in psychological torture between Phil, played by Benedict Cumberbatch, and both Rose, and then following that with Rose's son, Peter. And it culminates in Phil's death, which is revealed to be anthrax poisoning by the son, Peter. Now, that's a very brief summary because there's some beautiful movements in there, particularly around Phil and Peter's relationship.
Mm.
As in that they are the unlikely coming together.
Yes.
Not sexually or anything.
I mean, although that's left very, to me, ambiguous.
True. But in terms of connection.
Yes.
Yeah, there's a decision that Phil makes that he's like, oh, we were off to a bad start. Let's become friends now. But I want to take a wider look, right? Because coming back to what we're talking about in the previous episode about emotional contract is, Hustlers, like the heist film, the emotional contract, I guess, is fun. And them succeeding, I guess, in the heist, like the thrill of... That one's a little bit... There's a thriller element to it, right? But there's definitely like an emotion, like a sense of joy and something like that about the emotional contract, and particularly revenge films and catharsis. I think what's interesting about Pig is it delivers on catharsis, but not in the way that you think, right? It's not violent catharsis. It's the opposite. It's a catharsis delivered through connection. But when I think about Westerns, I don't necessarily think of a particular emotion. Right, I don't even think of joy, like, crime, that kind of like good time crime, Goodfellas. It's like, this is going to be the good times followed by the bad times, right? That's kind of like Hustlers is in that structure. But I can't think of that with Westerns. They feel, as a genre, it's a lot less grounded in specific emotions. Like, there's types of Westerns that are either about like man's inhumanity of man or are about the colonization and imperialism. Does anyone else not have a very specific handle on what Westerns are?
I've got some, but I want to hear what Kodie has to say. Like, are there any Westerns that you love, Kodie?
I actually love Westerns. Like, I went through a big Western phase when I was like 22 and just hired out from the very limited section of Video Easy in like Perth, one of the Perth suburbs. All the films I just would fall asleep every night. And so like Butch Cassidy, all those kind of films. Yeah. And they were just like adventuring good times. That's what I expect from a Western. An adventure, one, and just a good time.
I have a very different experience of Westerns than you do.
Yeah, well, this is the thing with Westerns. I think that because there's so many types of Westerns, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And look, you can track a lot of social change through Westerns as they've evolved, because they came and went in popularity various times throughout the very short history of cinema.
Yeah.
And I don't want to get into a lecture here where I don't really know a lot of what I'm talking about.
No, but you've got an emotional experience, right? And I think that's completely legit. I think Kodie's just like, the Westerns that I picked and liked were adventures.
Robert Redford is hot, basically.
I mean, there is no arguing with that.
No, still, how does he do it?
But there was, like if you go back to like the John Wayne Westerns, there was definitely, I think if you go through almost all Westerns, they do have some comment on masculinity.
Yes, that is true, because also on the flip side, female characters, absolutely awful.
Like no matter when you look at a Western in what period of history the Western was made, they nearly are all about what is the role of men in society rather than what is the role of women.
Yes. To the point where I can't remember which film specifically, but I'm sure it's a John Wayne film where like he friggin' rapes a woman in one of the scenes and he's the hero and still the hero afterwards.
Oh, God. It might be The Searchers, but I don't want to...
Oh, it's the one with the quote, paint the posts red, or...
Was it High Plains Drifter?
Yes, High Plains Drifter, that's the film.
Okay, so, you're talking about John Wayne Westerns. There were definitely some subversive ones like The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance and The Searchers and things like that were a little more accepting of the fact that white colonization of the West, taming of the West, cost. The Native American went from being like the easy racial villain to being the victim. And then you got into the revisionist Westerns in like the 70s when they came back, and you've got like Peckinpah and stuff like that, where it is really using the violence of the West to, make different commentaries. And then you've got in the 90s in, like Unforgiven and fucking, I don't think Unforgiven and Dances with Wolves should be in the same categories, but they're more self-aware. They were using the genre trappings to say different things. But nearly all Westerns, because of their setting, right? In terms of, so Stu, you're asking about the emotional contract. To me, the Western setting is less about emotion and more about the very theme of the Western. You set something in the West, you kind of inherently have to explore what is quote unquote civilization, and you could read that as colonization, versus like the inherentness of the land. And this, in the first act of Power of the Dog, very much embraces that, because you've got like Phil and George in their beautiful ranch house looking like they don't belong there, with there's a maid who's setting the table. No, I'm not going to eat there. They're wearing cowboy clothes. They look other than in their very own home. And then they're driving the cattle to the next town to sell them. And George is in a suit and Phil is in like traditional cowboy gear. And they get to the town. And even though this is a tiny town, Rose and Peter look different. They dress different. They're cleaner. Peter, like that initial scene of them interacting, there's so much work done. Peter makes art, like he's got this collage book with his drawing. He's interested. He's educated. He's wanting to become a doctor. He combs his hair. He makes beautiful flowers out of paper. There's all this, Westerns inherently to me are about the clash between a quote unquote more modern society, and whether you want to make the comment that more modern society is more inherently evil than the less civilized society. I feel like my words and terms here are very loaded, but it is about that clash between two different time periods.
March of Progress and...
Well, there's always that trope of the hero, the Lone Ranger riding into town, right? And he's the catalyst of change. We do have that. It kind of does set up Phil, even though I was a bit confused about his character and what his role is in this, because George is in such like the suit. George says to Phil, "Can you like get dressed up for dinner or something like that?" And Phil responds, "No, I like being dirty." And that kind of says to me, in terms of character, we're meant to be with Phil. Like, he's not changing who he is. But then we kind of get into Phil's character of he's not a nice guy. So we're not really with him. We should be with George.
There's a couple of interesting things that I'm just reflecting upon. You talk about like that Phil refusing to change, like him being committed to cowboy, because this film is set really late. It's 1925. You see them riding to horses onto town. There is that. You're not exactly sure what year it's set. Then you see the car later and you're like, oh. So I think that is definitely one of the thematic ideas of Western is the march of progress versus it's like conservative versus progress. I just found it up, the list that I talked about in the previous episode. And I think what is interesting about this film is how it pulls the levers. So we had this idea that there are narrative structures that are connected to genre. And we saw how the structure of Pig was definitely connected to kind of like a revenge structure.
Yeah.
There's these conventions, these patterns of characters, which you definitely have in Hustlers as well, because it's about the outside, like in a heist movie, it's about the poor people getting the revenge on the rich. It's the class warfare element of those heist movies, right? And in this, you definitely have the cowboy, like this specifically, you have the cowboy and the businessman. There's the setting in the world, which in Hustlers, you get the strip club, right? And then what is interesting about Pig is this underworld, this unseen world that I do think you connect kind of that John Wick revenge film going into this underworld. And you definitely have the setting of the world of the Western here. There are the rules of the world, which is something we didn't talk about last episode, but you brought up at the beginning of this episode, that there are rules of the world that are connected to the genre, right? And I think we might come back to that. There's the tonal elements of it. Hustlers definitely has it. That's Scorsese kind of rise and fall, crime, joyous, despair, all that kind of stuff. And then the kind of the thematic ideas, these kind of ideas that the films are itching and reiterating. And Hustlers is about, as much as about character drama, it's also about like America as a business or America as a strip club. And Pig is about catharsis, but not catharsis through violence, right? What is interesting about Power of the Dog is it's like quite a few of these are hitting, but then there's others. Like, I don't think the structure is very Western structure at all.
Absolutely not.
And I think that's the biggest difference.
Yeah.
Right? That it's using these trope stock characters. Oh, he's the I don't know. Is this point is a gay cowboy like a trope? It almost
well, not
feels
according
like
to Sam Elliott, but you know, like had no one sat him down and watched Brokeback Mountain?
And issues of masculinity, like questions of masculinity, which are connected to that, are definitely a theme of Western and the March of Progress. So it's almost like the two big levers that swing Power of the Dog more towards a drama are structure, right? And this kind of like Greek, I don't know, I haven't studied enough Greek classics, but it's almost like leaning into this kind of like, you could take this film and tell it in mythical times.
Absolutely right. Because I wouldn't call this a Western.
What makes it not feel like a Western for you? Besides the fact that New Zealand's shot in New Zealand.
Besides the fact he's wearing a cowboy hat, it was always a drama for me.
It wasn't about heroism, and it wasn't about it's not even about anti-heroism. He's not an anti-hero like they are in Unforgiven, or even Assassination of Jesse James, or The Proposition. I don't know as Westerns as well as you.
I love The Proposition, by the way.
Oh, if anyone likes Westerns and hasn't seen The Proposition, Australia's best Western.
Yeah.
Anyway, I agree with you, Stu, where I think the lever that it abandons completely of the Western is structure. It doesn't follow any of those story archetypes
or tropes.
The point that I'll mildly disagree is that it actually follows the full-on Western even narrative for the first chapter and then abandons it completely for the rest of it.
What's the first chapter?
So the first chapter ends with the cattle drive. It's before Fatso drives back to Beach to propose to Rose. So it starts with men hustling cows, driving them to a town, and then engaging with particularly Phil, who's kind of portrayed as far more of the protagonist in that first sequence, as being both threatened by and threatening the trappings of civilization. He yells at the people who are playing the pianola and scares them away.
Shut that down or I will!
It's very much like there's this big threat of violence pouring out of Phil in that first thing. And the opening is almost like Unforgiven. Like Unforgiven starts with Clint Eastwood trying to trap animals I think it's pigs in a sty, and he falls in the mud. And my favorite Western is actually Open Range, which is a Kevin Costner directed film. And like that first sequence is all about a cattle drive, right? Like this feels like a Western
Mm.
And then I've got here chapter 2, which is all about Fatso's courtship of Rose. And interestingly, Peter is completely absent in chapter 2, pretty much, Rose's son, Peter. It's all about George's courtship of Rose and the conflict that's setting up between George and Phil. And I'm like, chapter 2 has nothing of a Western about it. It could have happened in any genre. And then chapter 3 is the rest of the movie. It's like the 2/3 of the movie is the single chapter. But to me, it's almost like there's obviously sequences in those chapters when, like, you know, to me, the sequences are Phil's psychological torture of Rose until he breaks her, Peter coming back for the summer holiday, and then Phil turning his psychological torture aims onto Peter, and then Phil deciding to start protecting Peter and turn him into a man and bring him under his wing and possibly groom him for sex abuse.
Oh, there's definitely meant to be the fact that they're kind of in somewhat of a romance.
Yes.
That it's loaded, that they're kind of dancing around each other.
Phil, I've got rawhide to finish the rope.
You got it. What are you doing with rawhide?
I cut some up. I wanted to be like you. Please take another out.
It's damn kind of you, Pete.
I think it's just interesting because I have talked about this film with other people, and the perception of whether or not the relationship between both Phil and Peter is consensual or not, and the relationship between whether Phil and Bronco, his deceased mentor, was abusive or not clouds it. Like it changes the way they see it.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Like, I didn't care about these characters, so I'm like, I don't care.
I cared very much because when Phil turns, so there's a scene where they're in some kind of creek and all the men and all the cattle are in like one spot. So it's some kind of seasonal cattle rearing thing. I'm showing my deep ignorance of farming.
You're just not a man, Chas.
And Peter is walking along and he's ignoring all the catcalling from all the men as he's wanting to study a bird's nest. And Phil sees all that, which he has encouraged himself. Like, he's encouraged the men to torture Peter previously. But it's in that scene that Phil, and I'm only saying this having watched it twice, retrospectively, chooses instead to kind of protect Peter, right? It changes.
Peter, you kind of got off on the wrong foot.
Did we, sir?
Forget the sir stuff. That can happen to people. People who get to be good friends.
But in my first viewing of the film, I was convinced that Phil was gaslighting Peter, was trying to win Peter's trust so that Phil could get him out into the hills somewhere and then either rape him or murder him, or something awful was going to happen to Peter. Like, that was the suspense that I felt on first viewing. So why did I care? I was deeply concerned for Peter. And even when Phil changed, I was worried that Phil was just, you know, gaslighting and manipulating Peter. And what it turned out to be was quite the opposite, that Phil did genuinely change.
Characters don't usually change. What made you change your mind?
I think there was the scene where Phil and Peter were actually out in the middle of nowhere and they were building a fence and there was a rabbit involved. That was to me like, oh, this is Phil's chance to fuck up Peter somehow. And he didn't take it. And in fact, they grew closer together in that scene.
I guess the question I want to ask, Kodie, is why, at what point did you think the film was trying to get you to invest the characters, and why weren't you invested?
I mean, I say this with love. I don't think this film is for people like me, women of colour, women and women of colour, which is interesting because it's made by Jane Campion in terms of the women aspects, and we won't get into the Serena Williams thing. Because I am of that background, I just could not invest in any of these characters. I did not believe any of these characters. That's not to say this isn't a brilliant film, but a lot of people I've spoken to that are of the same view. Like, I saw it at Sydney Film Festival, and all of them were like, I don't get it. I don't get this film. And maybe it's because Jane is too clever for us little plebs in the front seat, where she's very subtle about where she places these things, but don't take away from what this film is and means to people, because I'm sure it is. I don't agree that it's a masterpiece that people are saying, because I just did not. I thought the character study wasn't believable, especially the Kirsten Dunst character. Did not believe at all. And I thought it was interesting, like, of all the undeveloped characters, it was the female character that felt the most undeveloped. But in saying that, I appreciated I still thought a lot about the characters and the psychopathy. Is that even a word?
Feels like it is.
Well, I just said it with confidence.
Yeah. Welcome to the white man's trick.
Exactly. With the two leads and that. But for me to connect with films, and why I connected with Hustlers, why I connected with Pig, is because I felt the real world emotions and connected with the themes of what that film was trying to say. This film is ultimately about toxic masculinity. Am I right?
Not kind of, but not. I don't. Speaking of someone who is, as I've talked about before, both being a victim of toxic masculinity and perpetrated it, because that's how toxic masculinity works, right? We'll be toxic masculine to you until you join us, right? And be toxic masculine to others. I don't think it, as much as it's about codes of masculinity and stuff like that, I don't think it's really about.
I had to Google what this film was about afterwards. Every review refers to toxic masculinity, and I'm like, oh, that's what the film is about. And I just went, oh, that's why I don't relate to it. Other people did really relate to it, and it is beautiful. It's stunning, and I really want to hire that cinematographer.
Oh, Ari, she's amazing.
Yeah.
She hasn't returned my emails.
Yeah, damn it.
So I think on the one hand, yeah, it's about masculinity, right? As Westerns are.
Yes.
It's kind of particularly about performative masculinity. And what it seems to be doing structurally is that on the one hand, you kind of got it kind of being a little bit of a brokeback romance in this world where of coded masculinity and it was really oppressive on homosexuality, how these two men going to have a romance, right? On the one hand, it's kind of doing as they're building closer. And then on the other hand, what it's also setting up is the fact, which I don't think we've stated clearly, but maybe we did, that ultimately Peter is going to kill Phil. And the film kind of ends with Phil getting sick and then dying. And then what we come to realize, which some people don't because it's played as a mystery, right? Some people completely confused that this is what it is.
Which people, a lot of audience members missed.
Right, that ultimately it turned out that Kodie McPhee, Peter Gordon, had found a way to infect Phil with anthrax in order to kill him.
Yep.
And effectively to take over then that his mum and her husband could run the ranch.
Yeah.
And it's very telling that compared to the other two films, that's basically when it ends. Because that's the plot. The film is actually concerned about I'd actually say it's the least drama of these other two films, because the other two films are concerned about relationships and stuff that's connected to personal lives. And that's why when the plot is over, the film still continues, right? Because the film has to resolve stuff that's related to character.
Yeah.
So in Hustlers, the question is, what happened to these two women? What will happen to these two women? And that's what you're concerned about. So even though all the heisting is over, the film continues to kind of give you moments to get into that.
Yep.
Pig ends up being about grief. So as much as he then has the ultimate moment of revenge, in a traditional revenge film, he would kill the big bad and the film would kind of be over and go to credits. In Pig, he learns that the titular pig is dead, has a moment of absolute grief, and then has moments of connection with Amir. We even spend time with Amir, like sleeping in his car. Like it's about him going like, see you on Thursday. Like we get a feeling that he's ready to re-enter the world, and he plays the tape and we see the water, and it's about who he is. This film doesn't do any of that because it's not actually interested in the characters at all. It's about the plot.
Thank you. You just articulated it for me. That's probably why I couldn't connect.
It's a magic trick. Like I think it's a wonderful magic trick of we're going to make you think it's about this romance, but it's actually about the murder. But then as soon as the murder happens, it's kind of like, and we're done. Go home.
Does that make it a masterpiece?
Well, I think I've got an interesting definition of masterpiece, which is a complete aside. But to me, a masterpiece refers to the fact that a master, which is, you got to decide whether or not someone's a master, but a masterpiece reflects all the values of the creator, right? Exactly. So everything that the creator's interests are, to me, creates a masterpiece. So it doesn't necessarily say it's their best film or their most interesting film. It's just the one that, to me, is most representative of who they are as an artist.
Yeah, right. That's a great definition.
So I don't know whether it's Jane Campion's masterpiece. It really depends what you think Jane Campion makes films about.
You know, most of her films, I think, explore the masculine as antagonism to the feminine. You know, if you think of The Piano and In the Cut and, you know, Top of the Lake.
I think that also is true of this film with the Kirsten Dunst character.
I actually agree with what both of you are saying. But I think what I enjoyed about it is it sets up Phil as the villain. And I thought, like, you know, the way that the first chapter is set up, I actually thought it was going to be about between the two brothers. Like, that was going to be the key conflict. George pretty much disappears from the rest of the movie. So first of all, the whole sequence of him torturing Rose before Peter comes back into the movie, it's not a Western at all. It's almost like a gothic horror. It's this man torturing this woman in an isolated, beautiful house. And it could have happened in any time period, could have been contemporary. It didn't. The only thing it needed was to be isolated. So this is the film that definitely it leans in very heavily to the Western tropes at the beginning and then just abandons them completely.
By when? When do you think it abandons them?
Definitely as soon as Rose comes to the house.
Well, can't have a woman in your Western.
Yeah, how dare you?
There's just nothing about it that is particular to Westerns other than isolation, and there's plenty of other genres that have isolation in them. But as soon as, like, it becomes about Phil kind of confronting his own, you know, it's like cliche, but self-loathing of his own sexuality, and that when Phil dies, it's portrayed almost as a tragedy because he has kind of tried to reach out to that person that he'd previously been victimizing for being too feminine. So that's what kept me interested. And it's just to go back to where it does occasionally drift back into Western settings. First of all, you know, the governor's visit, which is part, like, the culmination of the torture of Rose, is very much around the conflict of, you know, like you said, Stu, the March of Progress, where Phil is actually the most educated of all of them. Like, he's got a degree from Stanford in classics or whatever it was, and is clearly a talented musician and a smart business person and all of those things, but just doesn't want any part of that world and threatens that world and assaults it. The whole journey between Phil and Peter, it's irrelevant that it's happening in, quote unquote, the Wild West in Montana in the early 20th century. Like,
true.
But where it does return briefly to those initial Western tropes that I was talking about is the only time that Phil dresses up is he dresses in his suit to go and die. And he gets into the car. It's the only time he gets into the car is to go and die. And I just thought those were very interesting, fascinating choices, storytelling choices by Jane Campion.
How would I write this film?
It would be an adventure.
I wish Rose and Peter were black. One, I thought that could be an interesting take. Or I wish that just to give Rose some more agency. She's so pathetic because, yeah, otherwise I just didn't believe it. Then I would have connected. But I understand. No, actually, I don't understand because I just don't understand the film because it's not for me.
I mean, it's fascinating to me. The film's called The Power of the Dog, and it ends with, like, Peter with the quote. And it's saying that Peter has power arising from, you know, being conniving and intelligent and not macho, aggressive, strong, powerful, all those kind of things. So it's definitely an exploration of the masculine.
I guess, but did you find it fresh?
I went into it very cold, enjoyed the movie very much, was suckered into a Western, and then delivered like basically a psychological drama about a self-loathing gay man.
Mm.
I enjoyed it.
Is that fresh?
Yeah, no, good. It is good. That
Just interrogating Chas.
we're talking about in this episode, like let's say you've got a particular story, a dramatic story, a relationship story, a drama that you want to explore, and you're going, what genre trappings could I use that actually makes me tell this story in what feels like a different way? Like a man coming to terms with his own grief, set in the underworld of the Portland high fine dining scene, chasing after a truffle pig in a revenge thriller is something that's completely unexpected. We've had Brokeback Mountain, that big subversion of the Western and the cowboy genre. So I guess in terms of being like groundbreaking in that way, this wasn't.
Yeah.
I think what makes it feel quote unquote fresh is that I think the other two films got like this drama core dressed up in genre. And I think this is a genre film dressed up in drama, right? It's a murder film.
Yes.
And it's the stylistic, and I mean narratively style as well as visual style, and make it feel more like a drama, right? As in its storytelling is very visual. It's very sparse. It doesn't rely on dialogue as much to tell you. It's structurally unconventional. So the fact that like George disappears, the fact that who is to emerge now, like as our primary point of view character, it disappears for a while. So it feels more unconventional and therefore more probably small D drama. And it feels like, because it's kind of interested in this burgeoning romance, it feels more like a relationship drama. But when you to me, when you look at it, it's more a type of genre film. I'm not saying it's horror or thriller, but it's actually more interested in plot and some thematic elements to plot.
It is plot.
But it's the approach to how it was made makes it feel more like a drama than it perhaps is compared to the other two films.
I mean, the piano banjo sequence is like pure horror and tension, where she's like trying to learn piano and he's like overplaying it with the banjo.
Yeah.
And it's so beautifully done. Like that's what I'm trying to say. It's like masterful in terms of its visual, like it's cinematic, like it's visual and sound of language is just.
If I ever want to explain how white people are, I'd play that scene. I'm like,
so you're trying to play the piano and Chas and I are doing the banjo?
No, it's just all white people. This is how white people have conflict.
I will say, okay, so here's how it's keep it fresh. I've only just come to this realization as Stu just relayed it, but the protagonist of each sequence changes.
You're right. That's interesting.
Phil is clearly the protagonist of the first sequence, like he's driving all the action. He's in charge of every interaction. The second sequence is driven by George, like it's George's courtship of Rose and wooing her and bringing her back to the ranch. And then the third sequence, it's back to Phil torturing Rose.
We're more inside of Rose's experience, so she becomes more...
She's definitely the point of view character of that sequence. And then as soon as Peter arrives, it starts becoming Peter's point of view. And Peter initially feels in control of the plot, but it's Peter's point of view. And eventually Peter becomes in control of the plot as well as the point of view character.
I think if I went in now and rewatched it with the view of this is a murder film, I'd probably like it a lot more.
Like that's the entire. That's the script. It's a murder movie.
It's a murder film, you know. Also, shout out to, as I say, Spotto, one Indigenous character, Adam Beach, makes an appearance in this, who was one of my first ever crushes. He's a Native American actor.
Buys the hides.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so I guess that is a Western trope, of course. You have your natives in it. So I got one.
Yeah, wow.
It got fucked over.
Yeah. I had something else to say now. I'm just going to... What were you saying?
I hijacked that.
No, it's good. Oh, no, the character point of view stuff. It feels more novelistic because novels will tend to follow a point of view character and then shift a point of view character on a chapter. Feature films, because we can intercut more easily, and television will intercut point of view characters more. So doing something that's like we're going to have a clear point of view character for a chunk of story, and then we're going to have a clear point of view character, feels more novelistic and more unusual in cinema, and perhaps a little bit more sophisticate, you know?
This is probably, from all reports, Jane Campion's last film.
She might want to stick with television.
No, well, I mean, how do we feel about that? Did she go out on a high, if it is her last film?
Well, I think all of our opinions have been somewhat laid bare here.
It's a redundant question.
She went out on a high plane drifter.
Oh! Far out. You're fired, Stu. Didn't we tell you the Destiny's Child?
All right, so Kodie, you came out of our last episode kind of re-inspired to like tackle your writing, having studied those 3 films, having had 3 very different films, but also allegedly of their genre. Do you feel any differently this episode?
No, the film that did spin me out the most was Pig, because I mean, I talk about the plot and it's so ridiculous, right? But it doesn't really get to there's so much character in that film, and that in terms of being a writer for all of us, like that is such a huge lesson for me. Like you can write the most ridiculous thing, but you can ground it in such beautiful character moments and themes and real meaning, which is what draws me to films. And I spoke really negatively of Power of the Dog, and I don't actually think it's a bad film. I just couldn't connect to it.
You didn't speak negatively. I don't think it's negative to say it didn't work for you.
Yeah, it's just because I couldn't connect to the characters. I could connect to Nicolas Cage, which is so weird to say. So it taught me in terms of my writing, like, yeah, if you write something, the most ridiculous plot, you can still ground it in character. And I love that. I love that lesson.
Stu, do you have a main?
Yeah, so there's going to be 2 things. One, which was a quote-unquote lesson I had picked up from Hustlers and Pig, which is the connection between the genre inciting incident and the kind of the more character-driven thing. Yeah. I think what's interesting about Power of the Dog is that repeats it, like the meeting of Phil and Peter early on does really say, how is Peter going to get back at Phil? And that's not a character question. So I think that's still part of it. The other thing that I've been thinking is about the kind of the way that they strip away the genre elements. It's just cool. Like, I can't really say anything more than that. And whether I do, like, it starts off, like, there's sequences, all of them open with really strong genre sequences, and they find ways to kind of, like, surprise you constantly and then deliver an emotional catharsis. And it's actually interesting. I just went and edited my Letterboxd review for Power of the Dog. I just knocked a half a star off it. And I nearly put up Hustlers by half a star. Because I was just thinking about it, like, obviously it's such evocative imagery, experience, like sense, the sensation of watching Power of the Dog was really strong, but I just don't think it will sit with me as long as Pig or even Hustlers.
Yeah.
Like there's a lot of really cool stuff in Hustlers, and I know there's some people that are like, oh, it feels like it's being too Scorsese, and there's other things that feel like, but there's just something about like it's fun and lovable. Like I'm way more likely to rewatch Hustlers than Power of the Dog.
Oh, absolutely.
And Pig.
I will say about Power of the Dog, for me, what I loved about that film was it did get us talking about these like masterclass in filmmaking and that kind of old school, and I hate using that phrase, old school, slow burn, drama kind of storytelling. And that's something we don't get nowadays a lot of.
Yeah, there's particularly on a streamer.
Yeah.
Right?
I don't think there's any disputing the craft and talent that goes into Power of the Dog. I mean, one of the things that I really noticed is in that opening sequence, do you remember Phil goes up to bed and he's surprised that George isn't there? And there's this shot that lingers on the fire escape rope. And, you know, it ends up being a rope that murders him. Anyway, there's like so much visual foreboding throughout that film. Look, for me, clearly Power of the Dog out of these three films is the one that like uses its genre the most. Like it's just like, oh, here's a genre that I'm going to use to get you all in, and then I'm just going to throw the genre away and just carry on with the story I want to tell. The other two films, the genre elements are more involved throughout the films, even if they're ultimately all three films are character studies in one way or another. But to me, my biggest learning is kind of the antithesis of the last episode. Whereas the last episode, I was like, you only need to like throw out the rule book for a single sequence to make a movie feel fresh.
Yeah.
Whereas this episode is teaching me like you only need like that opening sequence to lure an audience in. Yeah. To set up the premise of the genre, and then it gives you the leeway. I mean, look, Pig, to me, it was the opening act. It was a lot longer amount of film, but like that waiter fight club scene, it bought you the rest of the movie.
Yeah.
They just went full on weird for that one sequence.
Well, full on weird, but also I think the pig kidnapping, right? The pig, like, you've seen the trailer and then they kidnap the pig and it's really, the violence in that's really horrific. And he's like, I'm going to get the pig back, and he hunts down Amir. Like, that is fully leaning into the genre, right? It's just that, you know, and you're just waiting for this moment that he's going to fuck up some guy, and instead he chooses to get fucked up.
But that whole first act, it didn't feel like it. It certainly was longer than 10 minutes. I can't remember how long it was, but it felt like a lot of story.
Oh, yeah. But the pig is like 11 minutes. It's just that it's silent. I think him hanging out with the pig and digging truffles is not super exciting. It's pretty. It's Pacific Northwest is gorgeous, but
I really was surprised. Thank you guys for introducing me to Pig. It's a film I never would have watched.
Well, we have to actually thank our editor, Chris, who was the one who strongly suggested it. Neither Stu nor I had watched it, and he was like, you should look at this film. Did he suggest Pig as well?
If you really want to see a great Western, The Harder They Fall, and if we ever talk about that,
Cody,
I'll be on the show again.
Harder They Fall, but have you seen Open Range?
No, should I watch that?
I want you to watch Open Range and just tell me if it's like white people problems that you don't care about.
I've really set myself up.
I feel like that is an entire episode. White people problems in Westerns.
Yes. Like Phil and Kirsten Dunst, Rose, that scene, it is really white people arguing. Like, honestly, if we take away anything from this podcast episode, it's that scene, if you want to explain white people to people.
All right, I would just like to say the value of fucking physical media is because Open Range is not on any streaming service, nor is it available to rent. You can borrow my DVD.
Oh, what?
Cody.
Well, you just sent me
my standard definition.
Well, okay. When I'm back from Paris,
ooh la la,
about to go to on 2 days from now, I will come to Melbourne and borrow your DVD.
And then you'll be like me and not return it for about 4 years. I only returned the last batch of DVDs and Blu-rays I borrowed off Chas when he had COVID, and I dropped off a supply package, and I'm like, today, here's some movies of yours, including a couple that was still in the plastic wrapper that he lent me without even having
Wow.
Any long-term listener of this podcast is fully aware of the kind of friend Stu is.
Yeah. I do not hide this. Speaking of, I was going to say shit friends, speaking of good friends, I would like to thank our top tier patrons, Crob, Sandra Theus, Randy, Jesse, Bjorn, Alex, Garrett, Thomas, Lee, Jennifer, and new top tier patron, Eduardo. You guys make War Draft Zero possible, so thank you. How many top tier patrons have we got? That's awesome.
That's amazing.
And thank you, Kodie.
Yeah, thank you for joining us and squeezing it in.
Thank you, mate.
Squeezing us in between a writer's room and the
Paris.
And Paris.
This says a lot about my character. I had a choice: go to Paris or go to visit my family who I haven't seen since before COVID in WA. I chose Paris.
But also, in your defense, Paris is easier to get to right now than Western Australia.
It so is, and that's why I chose it.
That is so disturbing. Oh my. But there's cheap flights to Margaret River now, so you're right. Soon enough.
Oh yeah, I'll get there eventually. I'll probably, if you invite me back, I'll probably be tuning in from Perth
when we do westerns. I'm actually really up for doing a Western episode. We've got to work out what
are we doing? Open range, the harder they fall, and so Stu gets a pick, does he?
Ooh,
the proposition.
I feel like
just
you
picked
want to
it
do
for
a
you.
Western, like Logan. No. You want to do a non-historical Western, something like Logan or The Mandalorian.
I mean, we've already studied it, but Hell or High Water was just to me, the perfect contemporary Western.
Ooh.
I know.
We've done Get Out on 3 episodes, so I think we can do Hell or High Water on a couple. And again, it's it's the pattern of white people's problems. So,
I mean, Westerns are predominantly.
Actually, was it High Ground? And what was the other one that came out? The kind of revisionist Australian Westerns. Ooh, The Nightingale might actually force me to watch The Nightingale.
I mean, I can't comment.
I think you just did, Kodie.
All right. Thank you very much, Kodie. Thank you for joining us.
Oh, that was fun. I didn't come off as a cunt, did I?
I hope you all feel like arguing with either Stu or myself
about anything on this episode or anything in general.
And you can find many ways of getting in touch with us at our website at draft-zero.com.
At the website, you'll also find the show notes for this and all our other episodes,
as well as links to support us and spread the word for free via a rating and review on Apple Podcasts.
Very important for spreading the word.
Or if you think that what we do here is worth $1 or preferably more than $1, then you can also find links to our Patreon page to support us getting these episodes to you quicker. Thanks.
And thanks for listening.